and welcome back to some more World End Economica. So, from what I can remember where we last left off, they were on the very last day of the trading stock market contest, from what I can remember. And so far, they had to pick something that has evolved a risky choice. So, let's find out if they will win or not. No, that's not right. I looked at Hagana. Hagana looked at me quietly. Whether or not I would be able to acquire 200,000 moves wasn't the critical point. Could I trust Hagana's data or not? That was the question. Hagana pressed her lips together tightly and looked at me. Her face was full of anxiety. This trading should have been for Hagana's sake. I loosened up and then spoke. Well then, let's go. I turned to face the screen, then put out the order. Starting at 836 moves, it cut down sell orders like a raging wave. Buying soon followed, but since my order had precedence, their speed was not enough. Before long, I pulled away from other buy orders and the price shot up into the sky. 850, 860, 868, 874, 879, 882. The force of my one attack stopped there. But there, the buy orders that couldn't catch up acted as a second wave, which pushed the price over. It took my breath away as the price flew up to 895 mules in one go. The average stock unit price was 861 mules, in excess of 900,000 shares. 10% profit from 720 million mules was 70 million mules. Just 20 million mule left to go. The buying flooded in with 3 minutes remaining. 897, 898, 899, the hundreds burying. And at that moment when it was surpassed, a new door was being opened in the world. It was that moment as I readied myself for that brilliance. Huh? As the buy order numbers inflated, things stopped. The situation before me was difficult for me to comprehend. Sell orders. What happened to the wave of buy orders was this. 600,000 shares in total. Could there be a lag in the system? Things moved at a horrifically slow and ominous pace, as if a massive meteorite had slammed into a star. I mumbled as I immediately looked at the margin depth balance. But it didn't move. A new challenger. If that were the case, then I could just get rid of it all and claim victory. I put out an order with the remaining 100,000 shares I had. The train volume opposed it, and then, in the remaining 2 minutes, the system moved. Buyers won out. This was going to work. Right when I thought that, immediately on the screen, the margin debt balance decreased dramatically. My breathing stopped. What was displayed was that within the earlier trading, there were margin buyers within the ranks. Oh geez. And then, those total numbers exceeded the statistical error Hagana had mentioned. That was the conclusion I came to. Sell. We weren't the ones who couldn't take it anymore. It was the margin buyers. What I was mumbling was wiped out by the roar of the demons in the last 2 minutes. The price reached 912 mules, and finally the buyers who were waiting to sell off their shares went and sold it all with full force. 908, 905, 901, 891, 882. It accelerated vigorously. Down to 1 minute. No one could stop a small amount of buying going in. The game was over. The countdown on the screen stopped and it showed that it was 5 o'clock. The price was 862 mules. My average stock unit price was, strangely enough, 862 mules. In other words, all of our trading was meaningless as our funds didn't even increase by 1 mule. The conclusion? Defeated. I mumbled quietly. The result was 260 million mules, second place. The prize money was 50,000 mules. At that moment, a popping sound reverberated, indicating that mail had arrived on the computer. Perhaps it was a headhunting solicitation, but why now? I ignored it and stretched my arms. Next to me, Hagana looked dumbfounded. It couldn't be helped. Hagana's forecast was off. Oh. Hagana mumbled something, but only tears came out. While looking at the numbers on the screen of the stationary computer, she cried expressionlessly. But I had nothing I could say. Instead, I placed my hand on Hagana's head and patted it roughly. When she had been frightened and sobbing in her room, she was covering up her head frantically. Thus, I patted her on the head. Hagana did not move to cover up her head. She just continued to cry without a single word. I gave her head one final light pat and then stood up from the chair. I wanted a drink, and I was tired. I also had to contact Barton. Giving him a big stretch, I popped my joints. I could say that I didn't feel so upset about losing because it was all in an imaginary world. But probably more than anything else, it was from the sense of achievement of having come so far in lockstep with Hagana. I made sure to remember that just doing something like that could fulfill one's heart. It wasn't a bad experience, not a bad one at all. Then phone rang. Even as the ding-dong Oh, it's the mail. Even as the ding-dong chime rang, indicating the arrival of the new mail, I decided that was the time to use the bathroom, and then at that precise moment the phone on the wall started to ring. Perhaps Lisa was calling to find out about the results of the contest? I laughed sarcastically to myself as I picked up the phone. Who is it? I expected to hear Lisa's high-spirited voice, so for a brief moment the voice on the other end sounded like noise. It's me, Saralt. What the heck? Looking for Lisa? I responded in annoyance, as if he had ruined my expectations. Well, I was expecting Lisa too, but you guys have free time, right? The way he said it, it almost seemed as if he knew about the investment contest. I believe that he did know about it, but did he really have that much interest in it? I guess. Well, in that case, I'm gonna head over. Huh? Wait, what's going on? I'll explain when I get there. Also, one more thing. Saralt stopped for a moment as he said that. How is Hagana doing? He really is a pedophile. Oh, Jesus. He had been babbling about how he got his hands on something with a girl who looked like Hagana. Perhaps it really was Hagana. I was a bit amazed thinking about this, but it wasn't as if I had little interest in the matter. It's pretty bad. I said that on purpose. That took Saralt by surprise. I smiled bitterly as I wondered how much he was into Hagana, but what I heard next froze that smile. Toyama is also coming along. Please take care of things. Huh? Hey, wait. Not hearing anything I said, Saralt hung up the phone. Toyama? He's with Saralt? At a loss, I looked at the silent phone. Maybe she had thought my conversation sounded strange. Hagana looked over while wiping tears from her eyes. Saralt asked how you were doing. That was how I worded it. Hagana had a dubious expression on her face, much like I did, and answered, Not too bad. Hagana said that and sniffled loudly. It's my fault that we lost. How? I don't know. I put the phone back inside. Hagana was awkward. She was very obedient, but awkward. Well, ain't that great. Actually, it doesn't bother me all that much. No words from her. It isn't just because I had decided from the beginning that I would give all the prize money to you. It's something more simple than that. I was embarrassed and rubbed my nose as I spoke. Besides, wasn't it fun? Then I looked at Hagana. Hagana looked at me blankly, and then she started crying again. Well, I don't know if Hal's question even helped her. I mean, they were so close. They didn't appear to be tears of disappointment, though. She smiled tearfully, so I knew those weren't tears of disappointment. Come on, how much more are you gonna cry? I'm not crying. Hagana's smile disappeared as she said something absurd. I didn't feel like retorting and just shrugged my shoulders. Perhaps so, but we have guests coming. What are you going to do? Yes. Yeah, are you going to shut yourself up in your room? Depends on who it is. Hagana answered bluntly. I hesitated for a moment, but I felt that it would be bad for her to just hide. Saralt and... I don't want to see him. Toyama. At that last word, Hagana really stopped crying. Why? I don't know. On the phone, he didn't tell me why. The loan. we can pay it back, right? Easily, but it will be some time before the prize money is received. On the other hand, the interesting thing is that he was expecting Lisa, it seems. At those words, Hagana raised an eyebrow. I didn't have any idea what it meant either. I wonder what's going on. I don't know. Hagana wiped her eyes, then, as if she were some transforming hero, her expression changed. But we'll know when we see them. Exactly. That's the spirit. Hagana had changed. That was probably for the better, and it's for the best. Hagana and I, without saying a word, sat at the table and drank hot cocoa. I didn't remember who initiated, but until the intercom rang, my hand was on top of hers under the table. When I let go, it felt a bit lonely. Oh, goody. Yo. When I opened up the church door, Soralt's big face was right in front of me. And look who it is. The ghost head. Toyama. And then next to him, then like a ghost, exactly, with the only sign of life in his eyes, stood Toyama. When Toyama and Hagana stood face to face, neither of them looked upset. Really? Toyama was no different from before, which meant Hagana was the one who had changed. Besides, it was more or less given that the loan could be repaid. Perhaps that understanding calmed her mind. So, what are you here for? Hagana and I sat side by side while Toyama and Soralt sat on the opposite side. Toyama held something that looked like an attached case, while Soralt was empty-handed. How is he empty-handed when he still has that handheld game thing? The PSP or whatever. You're not going to bring out some tea or something? Well, your shop is also self-serve, you know. That is true. Well, that's fine. There's something that needs to be discussed anyway. Soralt looked at Toyama, who was next to him. I have already talked to Lisa about this, but... Toyama said. Okay, go on. Hagana and I exchanged looks, while Soralt scratched his head. Looks like she didn't talk to them about it. About what? Sorry about that, Toyama, if you will. Toyama nodded as if he were sighing. He opened the attached case under the chair, pulled out a bag, and placed it on the table. The overpacked bag had a utilitarian design, with its sturdiness perhaps being the only selling point. There's 150,000 mules in here. Huh? I want you to take money. As much as you can with this amount. Whoa, are you for fucking real? There's no way a debt collector would give those two money like that. I couldn't imagine this being some kind of a joke. However, I could only think of it as a joke as my eyes moved towards the bag Toyama took out. Toyama followed the movement of my eyes and opened the bag for me to see. When he turned it upside down, wrapped banknotes tumbled out. All of the bills looked well worn and were wrapped up with rubber bands. It was like a scene from a mafia movie. But this was reality, and without a doubt, that money was real. In times like this, I'm embarrassed by this money, but that's the nature of business. I hope you'll be understanding. No, wait just a moment. What's with this money? It's not dirty money. I know it looks bad. This is money I managed to scrap together one way or another. That's not what I mean. Toyama didn't flinch at my words at all before speaking. Have you not both taken money from my clients and made it grow? Those sounded like threatening words to me, but I had no intention of standing down to Toyama, and perhaps that was the fault of my determination. What, something wrong with that? No, that's also a help to me, Toyama said. I more or less understand whether or not my clients will pay back the loans, thus, through the grapevine, I heard about your exploits and wanted to support you both wholeheartedly. So, you decided you're going to join up with the dregs? What the heck does that even mean, dregs? At my words, Toyama laughed feebly. My philosophy is that I will loan out money even to those who I don't foresee being able to pay it off, so long as I can trust them. But I won't gamble. That is what I've decided. Stocks aren't about gambling, you know? My apologies. I didn't intend to speak ill about it, but whether or not you two are able to grow the funds that you've gathered, is that not gambling? I could hear that it was just a play on words, but it wasn't as if I didn't understand. In the beginning, in the case of Chris's parents, they wouldn't have come by to entrust Hagana with their savings if they didn't know about her. So, since you hate gambling and all, why'd you come all this way with all that money then? I'll have him do the explaining. Toyama said that and looked at Soralt. Right, Soralt was here, but why was Soralt here anyway? You need me to do it? Please. Toyama looked as if his energy was completely sapped as he spoke. Soralt sighed and leaned forward on the table. You've heard about Lisa's debt, right? Yeah. That there was just a rumor. For someone as straight-faced as Lisa, she wouldn't have allowed that debt to persist. I figured something was up, so I did some searching. And then suddenly all the people around here started feeling the strain from debt, right? I thought that was kind of strange, so I called up old man Toyama here and we talked about it. He said that all in one breath. Old man Toyama here is also in the bind. About that, I held back the words already know as Soralt's massive noggin moved closer. So, do you know about the guys behind the scenes as well? But behind the scenes? In the beginning, I thought I was just a simple debt collector. It was true that the nice guy who funded Toyama had died from disease, and relatives of his back on Earth had sold that debt off to someone else. Maybe those guys living on Earth didn't think that they could collect debts from anyone on the moon on their own. The age of the orbital elevator was nothing to sneeze at, and if nothing else, the moon was famed for overflowing with the money of the deceased. If that were the case, there was nothing weird about selling it off to someone in the business. But in that case, what's the problem? Well, the moon is a place to make money after all. There are a lot of guys out there who are even sketchier than the ones you'd find back on Earth. I've had a company that I built up with my own hard work and determination taken away from me, and in that desperation, Lisa had saved me. So says Soralt, a poor owner of a cafe on the outskirts of town, whose impressive career was mentioned by even the cops. His programming ability was top tier and was able to fulfill all of Hagana's requests. Thus, my gut told me it all sounded fishy. So I checked up on the people pressing Toyama for money, and it was just as I had thought. It was a well-known land speculator. Land speculator? They aren't rare on Earth, and over on the moon in Newton City, there's a whole bunch of them. But for this area, they are still kind of rare, you know? I don't really get what you're saying. A land speculator? That's someone who buys up land or buildings or something? What would someone do with buying up land in this poverty-stricken area? Faced with my dumbfounded expression, Soralt spoke with gritted teeth. The Lunar City government had informal talks about the redevelopment plan. Once again, they weren't words I was expecting. My brain couldn't follow all of that. On the lunar surface, there's development right now in a new city, and for the sake of maintaining dominance as the foremost city and center of the moon, redevelopment is a necessity and such. Well, in short, they want to take this descripted place and make it shine, so that they won't be beaten by any new city. Naturally, there are a lot of interests tangled up in all of this, but in that case, these debts have nothing to do with the rights to the land and property. Toyama spoke. Huh? The lunar surface is the frontier, thus there is a need for laws to be in place. This is the most important of vested interests for a developer. Even if one were to own the land, if the people borrowing the land were to build upon it by their own ability, I would dare to say that city developments would more likely support that of the people who built their homes on that land. Rights are the same as that of the landowner, at least to that extent. On that note, there are a lot of homes that were built from scratch. Kid, you must have seen it for yourself as you went flying around, right? It seemed that he had seen me around somewhere, but I understood what he meant. In this area, there were nothing but buildings that were forcibly built up and complicated in their construction. forget even trying to navigate through them. It seemed that there were many places where you couldn't tell where one home ended and another began. While the administration had flirted with the idea of forcibly seizing property, well, a lot of money would have to be paid to the rights holders, or perhaps those people might be offered the rights to live there afterwards. But the problem is that people found out about this informal meeting, eyeing a possible increase in value, and wanted to corner the market. So then, those are the guys that hold your debt? Yes, I was being targeted. At any rate, that is why money has been loaned out to those living in this neighborhood who are likely not to return it. With these debts, without having to go knocking door to door with and negotiate, dozens of properties that for the most part can be seized, a cheaper way of doing things. When debts outweighed assets, that was to be expected. And thus, with Toyama's foolhardy but kind-natured manner of loaning out money, this had the reverse result. A tight-fisted moneylender would only lend out to people who looked like they could return, and only as much as they could return. But for Toyama, if the clients could be trusted, even if it exceeded their ability to pay it back, he was willing to be patient by having them only pay the interest. Certainly, the borrower would be grateful afterwards, but they probably just figured it was Toyama after all. If the borrowers knew from the beginning that their property would get wrapped up in it, it would be the same as being strung up with a noose. This was especially dangerous, given that a lot of them were slow-witted enough to not foresee that happening if they borrowed from Toyama. Thus, they relaxed their guard. People like that, with the noose tightening around their necks, were plentiful in the neighborhood. With redevelopment, this place will not be the same. Bluntly speaking, it will completely lose its identity. Beautiful shopping malls, beautiful residential units, beautiful roads. It would look like an extension of White Belt, perhaps. Of course, it would be a lonesome sight. But what saddens me the most is after all that was done to support these people, without getting any fair payment, they are being forcibly evicted. That's how the bad ending of the economy goes. I understood Toyama's exhaustion. Due to his well-meant loans, the nooses around the necks of those burdened by debt tightened. And then, due to how things were managed, when asked to pay back the funding, Toyama was unable to do so. They say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. You could say that again. The perfect example of that statement was right in front of me. If we can hold out until the decision on redevelopment happens, there won't be problems as the administration will then get on board with negotiations. But if before that the creditors foresee an increase in value, then using debt as a pretext, they could take everything from the people burdened with that debt from pennies. Take everything they have away, with only the debt left behind on top of not having a place to live anymore. Land speculators with the rights to the land and the debtors in significant property in hand would then wait to offer to help the administration gentrify things here. And then the shiny city will bestow upon the rights holders a rather large profit. Redevelopment also takes on the meaning of dividing up the wealth of the lower class. If you use taxes from big corps in New City raking in the dough towards the redevelopment, even people living on the outskirts supporting the majority in New City would benefit. But if the land speculators were to have their way with things, in the end, all of this will consist of only the rich getting richer. You come from the east, right? Soralta looked straight at me. Around where you're from, weren't there people who came to the moon after having been displaced by greater powers back on Earth? Weren't there, he said. My mind was filled with both anger and amusement. It was nothing but those kinds of people. It was only those kinds of people. Lisa is no exception either, so it isn't right for this to happen again. This is the moon, the frontier. Those who exert effort must be rewarded. Saralt leaned forward as he said that. The atmosphere was no longer the same as that of his dull attempts to show off. Saralt had once come from Earth and pursued success on the moon, and the merciless power of the city took everything away from him. My glance moved from Saralt to the bag that Toyama had brought in. Dirty banknotes had fallen out of that bag. Those dirty banknotes were carefully folded up by respectful people. You have the funds gathered from others. That and this 150,000 moles. If I have 800,000 moles gathered together, the seed money can be paid back. In doing so, the people here in this town will be able to keep hold of what they have. The people who've endured Earth and come here to endure this will finally be rewarded. Toyama spoke with a fervor. Beyond their actual appearance, the banknotes in front of me overwhelmed me with what they represented. The money at our disposal was 500,000 moles. Adding 150,000 moles to that put us at 650,000 moles. It was less than 30,000. It was less than 30% to get to 800,000 moles. Numerically, it isn't impossible, I believe. I should say that I understand the money that you've gathered from others is everything they have. Thus, were you to be near 800,000 moles, it wouldn't be enough. Living expenses. For the folks running a business, there were operating costs. For the infirm, there were medical costs. And for those with children, there were educational costs. The ones wanting to collect on these debts are approaching in force, but I think we should be able to hold out for a month. I wish for you to grow these funds. No words. 40% or maybe at least 50%? I looked at Hagana and she pursed her lips as she looked at the banknotes on the table. It's possible that she saw in it the irrationality of society. What's the deadline? I asked a much more important question. Hagana's pale complexion stiffened. Nearby, Saralt also looked downcast. I had a bad feeling about this. In the beginning, I am intending on holding off the assault of the people pursuing me to pay back the seed money. Saying that, he picked up a piece of paper from the attached case. It seemed old-fashioned in an era where electronic agreements were the norm, but perhaps that's why it carried such a strong air of intimidation. It was written in a business-like style with a government endorsement on it. If involved in repeated debt defaults, immediate repayment is requested. The individual who loaned me that money really was an easygoing person. If you can help others with 800,000 moles, then just say the word and I'll loan it to you at once. And no matter how many times the repayment period is exceeded, I'd write up a new contract with updated terms, but the history remained. Before long, I was a no-good debtor. Due to that, in front of the courts, I would have no choice but to present this certified document. In other words, if repayment is not made within the span of a week, my assets will be seized. The assets in Toyama's possession include just about the entirety of the townspeople's debts. In an instant, the person holding the ropes around the people's necks will change from the kind-hearted Toyama to a money-monger. 1 week? In 1 week? Why didn't you say that earlier? If that were the case, it would have postponed the investment contest. I stopped in mid-sentence as I remembered Saralt's words. When this conversation first started, he had said that it appeared that Lisa hadn't talked to us. He had said that it appeared that Lisa hadn't talked to us about it yet. Lisa knew about it. She knew about it all along. Just don't blame Lisa for this. Saralt said that right off the bat. We talked to Lisa about it repeatedly. Things would be bad if we waited too long. And that things could not be undone if someone didn't act. But Lisa stubbornly wouldn't agree to that. She said that if I were to go to you and Hagana to talk about it, then she'd get really mad. Why? I don't get it at all. You two really were in a trance, right? Saralt's pained expression pierced my chest. I thought back to the time I had spent together with Hagana. That was, without a doubt, a warm and wonderful time. And thus a character develops a bit. Lisa is that kind of person. She can't be influenced by things. Instead, she cares more about the connections between people. With the exception of books, probably, but I think she's probably going to sell those books. But she's that kind of person. Even if she no longer had a place to live, clothes to wear, or things to eat, she can still find a way to continue to live in happiness. She really believes that. Lisa said that it was after many friends and family lost everything in a conflict zone that she walked that narrow path and managed to reach the moon. Is there not something that we can do? We can give up money, but we can't give up these crossed paths, she would say. Lisa didn't want to get in the way of you two. There was nothing I could say. I didn't have any words that were ready to go. Good intentions. This was a good intention. Paved with good intentions, this road led to hell. That is why we waited up until now. It is tearing me up inside. You can see that in Toyama, you know? Toyama, who looked like a zombie before, was now completely a mummy. It wasn't just Toyama's own assets. He was burdened with the fate of others. But with 1 week, you too should be able to do something, right? At the very least. That is what Saralt said. This was a much more reasonable way to go rather than for us to go to the casino. Given the situation, they were willing to go that direction. True. It wasn't impossible. Still, the virtual marketplace of the investment contest was one thing, but being able to make a 50% profit in 1 week on the actual market? Of course, theoretically, it wasn't impossible. It wasn't out of the question to hit the 50% mark in a single day. However, 650,000 moles in total funds was an unwieldy amount. Worse than that, were we to fail, it wouldn't just be our failure. But I couldn't choose to not do it, no matter what. That wasn't possible. You just gotta believe. Will you take up this task? I opened my mouth, however, no words came out. No way that they would. This was a serious discussion, not a comfortable situation where it wouldn't be held against us if we lost. We hadn't gathered simple, naive hopes from these people. People was nowhere else to turn. It was a far more serious act of resistance against the continued irrational system brought from Earth. There's no one to turn to other than the two of you. Please. Toyama placed his hands on the table and lowered his head. Japanese style. Perhaps he had researched that I was a child of Japanese immigrants. Even then, I couldn't bring up the courage. But just then, something warm was placed on top of my hand. It sent a shock through me as I looked to my side. It couldn't have been anyone else. Hagana. Hagana stared at me firmly with those energy-filled, deep black eyes of hers. Even though it doesn't even look like it. It's like crimson red. Hal said it to me. And then her lips moved and she said it precisely. It's not whether or not it can be done. I squeezed Hagana's hand. But keep going until it works. Hagana was silent. After a moment she nodded. Yes. So, I tried desperately not to tear up for fear of Toyama raising his head and catching me, so I doubled my effort to keep a stoic face as I spoke. We better be properly compensated for all of this. Toyama's exhausted face managed to smile, also in a generous amount of interest. And with that, all of us were now in the same boat. Yep, it's finally settled. Alright. That was something right there. So, next part, we'll continue more of this as it goes on. So pretty much we're almost there. I think we're close to the end of the game. Or reading, per se. So, like, comment, and subscribe. See you then.